I actually did. I thought it'd be nice to start this podcast off with like, a good quote. So like, just change of pace.
Why, you don't think we can laugh in therapy? There's no laughing in
No, we
therapy?
could. We absolutely can. And don't get me wrong. I am gonna say dumb stuff very quickly.
I love a good quote, Syed. Hit me with it.
It was Carl Jung who said the separation of psychology from the premises of biology is purely artificial because the human psyche lives in union with the body. So I feel like that's an apt quote to sort of start us off today, as we have our guest Kacy come talk to us about sort of just the theme for the past couple podcasts have been mental health and how a lot of people don't, as much as they put a lot of effort in their physical health, don't put a lot of effort in their mental health, even though it's super important. And what we've learned and what we've seen on social media is that a huge part of maintaining your mental health is exercise. So Kacy, why don't you give us a little introduction to who you are and what your background is.
Thank you, Syed. Geez, where do I begin? I'll just start with my credentials and backtrack a little bit from there. My name is Kacy Lansing. I'm a licensed professional counselor. And basically that means I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling that I got from Fairfield University after a bachelor's degree at Sacred Heart University. My focus in my studies was counseling athletes. So whenever possible, I try to get those fun clients in my office when I'm in my office or on video, whatever we're doing at the time. My background on my undergrad was political science and English, completely unrelated. And aside from that, grew up playing sports, was an athlete for Naugatuck High School, played some sports for Sacred Heart intramurals, and have just kind of continued on, casually playing volleyball. And I used to teach Zumba for a little while. And so trying to always stay active when I can. Met Ryan in college at Sacred Heart. And luckily I've maintained a good friendship, which has allowed me to collaborate with all you guys from time to time.
Awesome. I think the best way to sort of get started is having been an athlete, what are some of your sort of initial thoughts and as to why you sort of started being a counselor for other athletes? Is it sort of just because of your background, or is there something in particular with athletes that you found fascinating?
Well, my personal story is that my junior year of high school, I started to experience some pain in my shoulder that I ignored, because I figured if I went to the doctor, they would tell me that I can't play sports anymore. And I was playing volleyball and softball, hoping to be recruited to play softball in college. Powered through the injury, which was not smart, but you know how that athlete brain works. No pain, no gain, right? So I was recruited for one college. I wound up walking onto the Sacred Heart team my freshman year, and I didn't even last a month before my shoulder I couldn't even brush my hair without excruciating pain. So I had to leave the team, which was a very difficult decision for me because I was always considered the softball player. And that was pretty much how I identified myself. And so it was kind of an identity crisis, if you will, at the age of 19. But hindsight's 2020. I was able to participate in so many other activities, clubs, intramural sports. I started a dance team with some friends, different things that I never would have had the opportunity to do had I been playing a Division I sport. So I was being grateful for that. But then as I left my undergrad and started exploring my master's degree, I figured I mustn't be the only person that's had that experience. And so I had gone to a counselor during that time that helped me through my process. And I wanted to be able to help others through that process, and also, gain a little bit more understanding about, the brain of an athlete, and, how does every athlete identify as an athlete, or is it just me? And it certainly wasn't just me. And so really that experience, my injury, I wound up getting surgery a couple years later after I quit the team. But that experience really guided me to my, specializing in counseling athletes, and that's how I landed where I am.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar situation to you. Obviously, like, at school, I'd hurt myself in high school, but I was able to get through it. Was playing at Sacred Heart for baseball and was fine for a little while until, I just couldn't pick up a pencil anymore because my arm was so numb all the time. The thing was, you probably did the good things about it. I didn't. I just sulked and didn't like it. And, I had surgery sophomore year of college. Came back junior year. I was pretty much ready to play. I wasn't back 100%, but by that point, junior year, that they basically didn't need another pitcher anymore. So they were like, okay, time to move on. And I didn't move on that well, so I didn't go near a baseball field or near a weight room for like 3 years because I had no interest. It was just like, well, because like what you just said, like I identified as a baseball player, as a pitcher, and if I didn't have that, I really didn't know what to do. Like even in the weight room, I lifted weights for baseball. I didn't lift like how we do for powerlifting now or just for exercise and health. I lifted to be a better baseball player. So without baseball, I was like, well, I'm not doing this. And I didn't go near any, like I didn't watch baseball, didn't play until a few years after when I was like, okay, maybe, there was a coaching position open. I took that, and that's kind of how I got back into things. But yeah, I mean, you took the better route after not being able to play than I did. And I think like this is kind of interesting because a lot of athletes, they go one of two ways. They either turn into something good, like, okay, I can't do this thing anymore that I've been doing my whole life, so I can do all these other things, or me, fuck this, I'm done, I'm not doing this. And powerlifting, like I said, and I've talked about this a lot, like it's a weird sport because it's like a super individual sport. So a lot of people really think of themselves as a power lifter, and if they can't hit their numbers or if they're hurt or whatever, like they don't know what to do with it. Where with team sports, at least there's a little bit more around you. Right. But for powerlifting, it is weird because like it's this hobby that becomes more. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much the reason why we wanted to have you on to talk about stuff, was because like it's such a hard thing for people to separate that this is a hobby and it's something that they're doing, even if they're very good at it, and they're doing it for lots of reasons, but like it becomes too much. So this is actually like an interesting time because like after being, the gym was shut down for, I don't know, 3.5, 4 months. So a lot of people didn't work out at all for 4 months because they didn't have what they normally do. So instead of doing something different, they kind of just did nothing. And now that we're back in the gym, people's numbers aren't the same. They don't feel the same. And not everyone's handling it as well as everyone else. Some people are okay. And some people were able to train over the break and they're fine. They're right where they were. And some people are like, okay, no big deal, I'll get back to where I was. And some people are not doing well. And, that's the mental health stuff that I think gets ignored a lot. And it's almost like it's not even thought of. It's just like it's not even a part of the training, even though a lot of it would play in lots of different ways. So
right. And I wonder if the folks that weren't able to do some of the training at home are coming back now and feeling like frustrated because they're comparing themselves to the people that did maintain a little bit more of a program.
Yeah. So some people like that had some time off, actually they realized the time off was really nice and they feel better. And like they said, okay, maybe this is a good thing. And what I've been saying to people is, now that we saw that 3.5 months, 4 months, whatever it was, didn't like ruin us, maybe we need to take a little bit more of a break every year and do some other things and just relax a little bit. But yeah, the people that were off for that time that really didn't lift weights are comparing themselves to their former self.
Right.
which they will get back there. Like, you know, I said, like my goal for everyone that didn't lift was to get to 90% of your best by the end of the week 12 of training. For most people, they're just finishing up week 12 right now. And everyone surpassed the goal that I set for them. Every single person. And still most of them are not happy because they're not where they were before. So even though they're not at 100%, even though most of them are 92 to 96% after taking 4 months off, that's great. But they're comparing themselves to their former self, so they're not happy there. And they're also comparing themselves to people that maybe had a home gym and didn't stop training the entire time. So now they're either at 100% or even some of them are 103%. They've gotten better. And they're like, well, why aren't I there? Well, like, you know, you took 4 months off.
Right.
And
it's hard to wrap their head around that.
Right. And that break, I'm sure for some people with injuries might not have been the worst thing in the world.
Right. No, it's actually, like I said, it's probably maybe not 4 months. 4 months is a long time, but like after having it off and seeing how people have responded with it and people getting back above 90% already, I don't think it's as bad as what we thought it was. And like I said, going forward next year, we're like, okay, maybe we can take 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, do some other stuff and not have to worry about it and relax both mentally and physically, and they'll come back and they'll be fine. But like I said, physically we are fine right now. The people that had injuries probably feel better. The ones that didn't have injuries, I think they feel great. But yeah, it's that mental side of, well, why aren't I where I was? Or why is that person so far ahead of me?
You know, and I think this ties into just the idea of rest days, right? I know you post a lot on your Instagram encouraging the rest days because your body needs it, but also so does your brain. And I think that what's difficult for a lot of people is to feel as though resting is productive. Because it's like, well, if I'm not doing something, I'm not going to get better. If I'm not, right. I should be, even if it's not related to exercise, I should be doing the laundry, washing the dishes, whatever it may be. I can't sit still because there's things I should be doing, right? And even that word in and of itself, should, is just so paralyzing sometimes for people. But the idea that rest is productive, I think, is just a reframe that a lot of people could benefit from, because not only do you just need to give your muscles the recovery day, but also your brain, your soul, basically, just time to recover from everything that we've been going through, especially this year.
Yeah, because I mean, there's always more stuff we can do. There's always more, like you said, like, you know, even if it's just like laundry, there's always something. And lifting wise, there's always something that like I'd want to add into the program, but we can't just add forever because we'll just be at the gym forever.
Yeah.
So, you know, like we've got a few people that have asked me, oh, I want to train 7 days a week, and I refuse to write a 7 day a week program. You know, we do have a few 6 day a week programs, and people that are listening to this that know that, like, there's only a couple of you, but I refuse to write 7 because you need that 1 day off at least, and really, like, more is probably even better. And some people do train more days than others just because they want to get the health in. They want to, you know, maybe it's a 30-minute workout here, or maybe it's yoga or something different. But just being able to do nothing is not a bad thing.
Right.
But it's hard. Powerlifting is such a, like I said, like, you know, you and I coming from like a team background, it's a little bit different, but powerlifting is, you're out there by yourself. It's super easy to compare yourself to yourself, because if you lift 5 more pounds, then you know you got stronger. But if you lifted 5 less, you didn't necessarily get weaker. You might just not have had it that day. Maybe it's an off day or whatever it is. Or the one that's probably worse, and this is because of like a lot with social media, you can look and say, oh, that person's in my weight class, they're the same age as me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Why are they lifting more than me? Where in team sports, like, okay, maybe you throw harder than me, but if we won, I don't really care. Like, it doesn't matter. But in powerlifting, it's very cut and dry. So like, you know exactly where you are at all times, and you can compare yourself to everyone. And it's so easy to see because everyone online just posts all their best moments. They never show like, you know, like just the working that they're doing to get better, or the lifts that don't go well, the days that don't go well. They just post the great moments, and everyone's like, man, like, that person's doing so well. That person's a fucking liar. Like, you know, we're all doing the same thing. We're all like fighting through, but it's hard to, when you see that all the time and you're in it, it's hard to take that step back and just take a breath.
I think a good, sorry, Kacy. Yes.
I was just gonna say, you took the words out of my mouth that, people aren't posting the struggle, they're and all the misses on the way to that hit, right? And so once they hit that lift, that's when they put, yeah, but remember, nobody gets there the first try. It just doesn't work that way. Go ahead, Syed, sorry.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to pose I think it's an interesting question. It might not be. But we alluded to this idea of using powerlifting as an identity. And I think the question I'd want to ask is, at what point is that identity sort of counterproductive? Because at the end of the day, like, just I think through existence, we all sort of want to know who we are as people. And we tend to sort of lean on things that we sort of do often. And powerlifting and exercising in general are things that are very productive and generally, but at what point is relying on that powerlifting identity too much?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that my view on this would be, if you could not imagine living happily without it, then that's where it becomes unhealthy. If you don't have other hobbies or support people or things that you can go to, lean on, fill your time with, in the place of that, God forbid you don't have access or are injured, then that's when we need to reevaluate the identity piece. Because yes, it can be a primary part of your life. It can be the biggest part, that's fine. But unless there are other things to supplement that, to make you a well-rounded, healthy person, that's when we want to be checking in with ourselves.
And like one of the questions that we talked about before was like, it's like you just said, it is a hobby that it does become a big part of everyone's life, and it's, making that hobby into a competition. So again, like we've talked about this before on the podcast. It's not like, professional baseball, basketball, football, where you're getting paid a lot of money. Like, even when you're really good at this, you probably don't make anything, really. I mean, and if you do, it's not much. So it's a hobby, and it's a form of exercise to keep you healthy. But like, once it starts to become competition, and like, I make the joke all the time that sports are great for you, but competitive sports are terrible for you. Like, and you and I just said, like, competitive sports, you're going to push yourself harder, and you're going to not listen to those little injuries, and all of a sudden you're being way more hurt. And then what do you do? I love when people are like, hey, my knee's been bothering me. I'm like, how long? Like 2 months. All right, cool. If you told me 2 months ago, maybe we could have done something about it. But now we have to like really pull back. And it's like you said, it's that idea of no pain, no gain. So I'm going to push through it. And it's so much their identity that if they take a step back and don't do it, what are they? And COVID made it weird because we were forced to. Like, there was no option. You just, well, we're not powerlifting for at least 4 months because everything shut down. And I think it was hard to handle for a lot of people because it just, it wasn't a choice. It was just like, oh, this is forced upon you. And I think it's, it goes back to your story and my story. Like, you quitting softball was forced upon you. Me quitting baseball was forced upon me. But like, what route do you take? Mm-hmm. And this is probably a good conversation because, like I said, I took the wrong path. So now I'm trying to teach people to not do that. So, that makes it fun.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too clinical on you, but I just want to toss out the concept that there's no right or wrong. You just make a decision and then you figure it out. You made that decision, you had to figure it out. And the path just was a little different than you thought it would be. And I think too, with COVID, oddly, it may have forced some people to sit and realize that they could be okay without it. It was uncomfortable, but they might have thought they wouldn't survive without it, and they did. And so that's a pretty cool thing too.
That's true. You're right. Because like I said, some people were able to continue on, but a lot of people had to stop, and they had to stop cold. It was literally like one day the gym was open, the next day we were closed. So there was no choice there. And some people went from having, full access to a gym to having like a red band or a bicycle, and that was it. And it's like, figure it out.
Right. And the hardest part about that, again, is similar to injury. I mean, it's out of your control, right? We didn't have a choice with COVID, and that makes it difficult for people to accept and be able to work through as easily if it was a choice to stop.
Yeah.
I have more to go.
No, it's fine. Yeah, you can go. I'm trying to internalize things to come up with a
So-
good
I mean,
question.
I could go on a little more about self-identity, but
Here's the thing. Well, the fun thing about this particular podcast is that, like, when Kacy, you're telling, reflecting on certain aspects, it's hard not to be all like, am I falling into these? Like, am I a reflection of the bad things that are going wrong? So, I mean, it's just sort of, everyone has, like, to take a step back, and I need to remind myself, everyone has sort of glimpses of bad habits here and there. It's just that, like you said, when those habits and that gets to a point where you can't do without it, or you exist around that specific bad habit, that it becomes an issue. So yeah, that's just, I was just internalizing things, like, okay, make sure, just checking in with myself.
it's always good to reflect. But I think too, I want to point out, I mean, I know the culture of your gym, Ryan. And so I know that it's not just where people get trained to powerlift. It's a community, and most people, that's their socialization too, right? And so yes, it's individual, but you're a team. And so I know a big part of the struggle during COVID especially was people losing the social aspect in life in general, but specifically at the gym for a lot of people, that's where their friends are. And so it may be that, okay, if you really hyper focus on this sport and it is a lot of your identity, can you incorporate other parts into that? So have you made friends there? Can you hang out with them outside of the gym and learn about them otherwise? And maybe it starts to expand the comfort zone there to be including more of a social piece that isn't just about the powerlifting. Now you're starting to make new friends and learning about other people, and then learning things about them that may open your eyes to other options for you.
I feel like it's a good idea. Try to use people because, like, well, I mean, at the gym, like, people are seeing each other all the time, and you're right. Like, some people have gained friendships from it, and they hang out outside of the gym too, which is great. And maybe some people just haven't thought of that as an option. Like, like, you have work friends, and you have, like, you're like, well, these are your gym friends, but why can't they be just actual friends and I do stuff? So I think that's a good way to put it. I like that. Go ahead.
I was just saying, there's merit in the idea that you're hanging out with individuals that share the same goal.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's sort of what that the team atmosphere brings. Like, you have your work friends, and I can only attest to work environments I live to, and though we all have the same goal of, like, this capitalist struggle to get the business more money, there are different aspects of that. Like, there are people who are in marketing versus people who are in, like, data entry and data collecting, so you're not as connected with them. But if we're all powerlifting at the same gym, all trying to get our squat bench dead higher and all compete, there's something, like, inherently, like, we relate to that because we're doing it ourselves, and that sort of builds on this idea that we have very close gym friends. I think a lot of at least through my experiences, I've made friends beyond the gym by first meeting them at the gym. And I guess that idea of shared struggle is, very, it's cool. And I mean, struggle's not cool, but the idea of it, of sharing that, is cool. And I think that's something that we are unique in. While most people who are in powerlifting are probably working out at powerlifting gyms, but in a much more commercial sense. You're a privately owned gym, and we see, like you said, all the people all the time. The relationships are built in a much more tangible way.
Yeah, and I think that it goes along with the concept of group therapy, really. It's that whole, people experiencing a similar experience. They're processing those emotions related to similar experiences in a space where it's we call it a transfer of learning, right? And so you're with your friends or whatever, you're at the gym, and while Ryan is the coach, maybe you can help each other, whether it may not be about technique, but it could just be emotional support.
or we're so emotionally stunted that I do that too. Which happens sometimes.
Yes, I'm aware.
Well, so like I'll take it a little bit of a different route. So like powerlifting seems to be a sport, like I said, because it's an individual sport and it's so numbers based.
Yeah,
it definitely feels like a sport that allows people who are overthinkers to like kind of thrive and enjoy this sport. So they, they're thinking about where they need to be technically, and they need to be perfect. And really at the end of the day, like, you need to be good enough. Perfect technique is not going to make you that much better than good enough technique. And they're worried about numbers, and they're focusing on all this little stuff. And it, like I said, really, like, that person who loves to overthink things, and I do the same thing, really seems to do well in the sport because they're just drawn to it. And we have several people at the gym that I, would be, when I say several, probably almost all, that would be like a good thing to actually go see someone like you, Kacy, to kind of go over some of these things, because talking to me about it, like, I can help a little bit, but I'm also their coach for it. So like, I'm overthinking for them what they need to do to get better at it. They're overthinking what they need to do. They need to somehow step away. And I know you had come and done the seminar at the gym, which we probably need to do more of. And I know some people have come to see you, and again, we need to see more. But it's finding, working around like so many different things to make sure that they're, like I said, with the identity that this is not their only thing, or that they're not getting burnt out on it. That was one of the questions I know we talked about a little bit, was like, because I think the break actually helped a lot of people, because they were so into this so much, and it became so much of their being, that they weren't enjoying it. It was more like, this starts off as exercise, and like, which is good for you mentally and physically. And then it becomes like, okay, now it's this hobby that I enjoy, powerlifting and going heavy. And then it becomes competition. And then it becomes, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not as fun because you're burnt out on it, because it's only what you're doing. And that's when we've talked about with a lot of people, like the way I try to coach in a way that people won't get burnt out physically, at least, but mentally, that, that's always going to be there. And, so like, any thoughts on like what we can do to keep people from just losing their shit and quitting, because it's a very repetitive sport, like it's squat, bench, and deadlift. It's the same thing over and over. So that's why I said I try to keep the training a little bit different, which is not the norm in coaching these days. But like, when you see someone who's like just squatting, benching, deadlifting over and over and over, like, that's boring. It's thinking like, if I were to go throw bullpens all the time and not actually play a game, I would lose my mind. Like, you need something. And, I can give the physical aspect, but any help on that?
Yeah, I think,
going?
variation, right, is what we're talking about. And I think that's, I don't want to assume, but I'm guessing, right, that's part of why you encourage the rest days and different activities on rest days, such as yoga or whatever. But it may be helpful for other people to, I know some people also have memberships at traditional gyms too, and sometimes mix things up, but it might be helpful for people to, take that break, and maybe they go do a Zumba class or a yoga class or whatever, and try something else. If they don't want to take a complete break from exercise, maybe they just have to do something totally different for a week or so, and then get back into it so they can reset. And, I think too, well, I don't know if you want me to touch on this general, the hobby turning competition point, or which way you want me to go?
Go wherever you want to go.
I think that the competition part can be very helpful for a lot of folks, because it gives them something to work towards. Folks that like really need a goal and something to work towards, or they feel like, what's the point? And so again, I think that can be healthy for a lot of people. But when they get in that frustrated area where they're not seeing the improvement, or they're not lifting heavier than they wanted to by X number, whatever date, I think that's when we have to kind of start to retrain the brain. And those overthinkers are usually very hard on themselves, right? And so when we reflect back on our no pain, no gain theory, that's true with a physical sport, right? You're not going to get stronger without some pain. It's just literally part of the deal. But that doesn't work for mental health. No pain, no gain is not how it works for mental health, except we beat ourselves up when we don't do what we want, right? And so being able to separate the two, that you're going to train your brain differently than you train your body, yet your whole life you've been told no pain, no gain. Well, what do I do with that? How do I break that pattern? And the goal is to be kind to yourself, right? And we hear these terms, positive psychology, positive self-talk, but it is so important. And so when someone's stuck in a rut and they're beating themselves up over whatever lift or an injury or whatever it may be, they're usually focused on, I don't want to do this again. I can't do that. These are things I can't do. I can't do this, blah, 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 blah. When they really need to shift to, okay, if this is my goal, what should I do? What are the things that are healthy how do I reach that? Not what do I not do to get there? What do I do to get there? And with the mental health, it's really about talking positively to yourself and reinforcing that, regardless of if you hit the number or not today, you've done something healthy and it's still good for you. And eventually you'll get there. But the self-talk has to be completely different than the way we treat ourselves in terms of our bodies. But it's really, it takes practice because it's not what we're taught.
Yeah, like I said, that's a tough one because when you're a beginner in this sport, you get better so fast that like once you hit that middle tier where you've been doing it for a little while, maybe a year or two, and you've gotten a lot better, but now it's kind of that time where everything slows down. Like it takes the body a while to keep getting stronger. Like you just don't add 5 pounds every workout, otherwise everyone would be monsters. And I'd say like it's like that period where like you embrace the suck. Like it's that period where like you might get a little worse for a little while, or you're kind of just at a plateau and you don't get better and you're fighting through and I said as a coach, what I'm doing is I'm learning what doesn't work for you, so then I can start peeling pieces back and use what works better for you. And then once we find that stuff, generally you see a big improvement again. The problem is we have to get through that plateau period, that suck period, and I think physically, I don't think it affects anyone. Like most people, like even if they've got like maybe some small injuries or even a bigger injury, we can work around that enough that they can keep training and physically they're fine. But it's that point where, yeah, they're not getting better and they're, and because like we have, maybe 2 to 3 competitions a year, you're like, okay, on this day, I need to be able to do this weight. I need to be able to, and if you don't get it, it's such a mental block that instead of being able to move forward and do well, you end up being so negative about it that now it affects the training. Because if you're thinking, like you just said, like, oh, I can't do this, well, we talked about like with RPE is relative perceived exertion, like how hard do you feel a lift is? Well, when you're in a shitty mindset, it feels harder. So then you're like, oh, that was hard, I can't go up. And like really, I'm like, no, you can, but it's getting past that negative spot and be like, oh, I can do this, I can do other things, I can focus on other things, bring up other issues and work on that instead of just exactly what it is. And that's tough. Especially like I said, if you have a meet where not everything goes exactly how you planned. And like some of these we plan for, 24, 25 weeks to get what we want on that one day. And that's the problem. It's one day. It's not like baseball or softball where you've got 4 or 5 games a week. It's one shot in like a 6-month period. And if you screw up, it just crushes people, where it should just be like, okay, well, we learned some stuff and we're going to do something different next time. But now they get to think about that one movement that went wrong or that one moment for months. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I don't know if you even know the story, like with Bucks, like Bucks missed a deadlift years ago in a meet. I think it was like 550 maybe. It wasn't anything. He should have had it and he missed it. And then like 6 months later at the next meet, he's like, I'm pulling that. And I was like, why? You can pull way more than that. And he just had to get rid of that number. And like he did it and it was like so easy. I'm like, dude, we should have gone up like another 25 pounds, but he just needed to get rid of that number because he thought about it for like 6 months, which is good and bad because he got rid of it, but it's bad because he could have done so much more, but he was so focused on that one number that he couldn't even think about doing something else. And that's really tough.
And that kind of circles back to that one lift, he let identify himself, or he just got stuck there and he couldn't move past failing that one lift until he did it in that one try. It's interesting because You're talking about a lift you can do on a good day versus a bad day. They're going to look different, right? And so one thing I talk about, especially this year with COVID, but just in general with people that I work with, is the concept that, doing your best, right? But your best isn't going to look the same every day, right? And so on a day where you got a good night's sleep and you ate well and you drank a lot of water, like you're going to feel good and you're going to do better and you're going to perform better at the gym. You're going to do better at your job, whatever it may be. But if you don't get a good night's sleep, or you didn't like your breakfast, you missed breakfast, you got a phone call from a friend that didn't go, whatever it may be. These little things impact our mood and our ability to focus on a lift for sure. And so your best on that day may not look the same. But I think it's important to sit and reflect, did you do your best regardless, given the circumstances of that day? And I think that can be helpful when it comes to that self-comparison and comparison amongst peers, but it's just not what people are used to doing.
I think that's actually one of the things you said there is like the reflection on it was, so one of our lifters, Sophie, does that, where like at the end of a block, she kind of takes out her notebook and she writes down like her reflections from that block of like what went well, what didn't go well, what could she have done better. And it's not just lifting, it's lifting, nutrition, it's recovery. She kind of does everything, and then she sends it to me. And I think that's actually a really good thing that she does, that probably would be a good one for everyone to do, because they can look at it and say, oh, like maybe I didn't focus on this enough over the last 4 months. Like on like the recovery aspect. Mm-hmm. Or maybe I didn't eat as well the last few months as I had been doing, and I didn't perform the way I wanted to. And then you can kind of see these patterns of like, okay, what do I need to do a little bit better? Now you've got a new thing to work on to make better, instead of just focusing on, I didn't do as well as I should have. Mm-hmm. So like I said, she's been doing that for probably, at least with me, for the last several blocks that she's done. She sent it to me, and I think it's really good. I look at it and say, okay, what, from what she thinks, what can I take from that, and what can I adjust into the program for, or what do I have no help on at all, but maybe she can, it gives her a new focus going into the next block. I think that's a really good one to just sit back and reflect. But also she does write the good things too. She doesn't just write the bad things. So she's like, oh, this went really well, this went really well, so then we know, okay, well, this went well, so let's do this again. And I think that's a really good thing, because it lets her focus on both sides instead of just the negative.
Right. And I think having that full picture, and maybe she does this, maybe add more to it, is, okay, food, whatever it may be, the lift, but what else about that day went well? Like if that was a good lifting day, what else did you do that day outside of the gym that also went well? Because that also impacts the lift, right? And so that's where we're talking like the full picture of who you are versus just that moment as a power lifter in the gym, right? Because everything that happened outside also impacts that workout.
See, it's stuff like that I like, and I'm excited. I know no one's going to do this, but it makes me think about, like, I'd want to put on the program, like I started adding in like rate this workout, and not everyone's gotten it yet. So if you're listening to this, like you might not have it yet, deal with it. But you will be. So rate the workout would just be like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like, holy shit, this was hard. And 1 being like, well, and this was easy. But maybe if we added to it, like, why was that? You rated it this, but why did you rate it this? Like you said, like what went well that day, or what didn't go well that day? Why did you, if you gave it a 10 and you think it was that hard of a workout, was it actually that hard of a workout? Like, did I try to kill you that day, or
was there other stuff going on?
Right? Did you have a really bad day, so it felt like a hard day? Say, I'm going to put that in your program, and you have to write me a little synopsis at the end of every day.
Yeah, and some people may even just for themselves want to do a rating before the workout. How am I feeling before this workout?
Yeah.
And then after.
Just to quickly just throwing a wrench in the conversation. Rating my workout might not be a great idea. Granted, you can't see it on camera, but my sweater says always struggling.
Right.
So, I think I might not be the best person to practice reflecting on just general.
Just 10.
But like, but I think a good thing is, like reflecting is not from my own personal experiences is not an easy thing to do. Like I'm assuming Soph has the ability to sort of reflect at the end of these cycles because she's been doing it for so long that she's able to tweeze out the good and the bad and be able to sort of say, okay, this went well, this didn't go well, versus someone who's probably coming into it the first time are going to focus on the things that pop out to them the most. And as I guess just the society we live in or the way we're brought up is we tend to focus on the things that sort of just went bad. And so like Kacy, I'm just going to throw this question out to you. Like, what are some steps we can do to sort of start reflecting on the good parts of what we're doing so that when it comes to reflecting later on, we have built up the habit of understanding, you know, where our or what aspects of our, you know, training or life has impacted us the most?
A really easy task to start with is a gratitude journal. And you know, people hear the word journal and they hear Dear Diary, which is just not at all true. I mean, it can be if you want it to be. That's certainly one way of journaling, where it's just stream of conscious, you know, get everything out of your brain onto the paper, which could be helpful for some people who loop in their head before they go to a workout. That might be good for them. But if we're just talking like quick and easy way to start kind of focusing on positive things, a gratitude journal is a great way to start. And so it doesn't have to be an actual journal. It could be a scrap of paper. I prefer handwriting, but if all you have is your phone and you want to type it in, you know, we'll take it. It's better than nothing. And you could just write a list, and it could be things that went well that day, or just in general things that you're grateful for. It could be one thing, it could be 10 things, it could be the same one thing every single day, and that's fine, and that's okay. But I think it's just a way to start refocusing your attention on positive things in your life. You could do separate journals. You could do one for life stuff, one for lifting stuff, and or combine the two. Kind of the way these kind of self-care strategies and techniques work is you figure out which ones work best for you. And so something that might work for you, Syed, may not work for Ryan, or you may have to tweak it. So just like training, right? It's the same concept that mental health techniques that may work for one of my clients don't work the same for another client, because everybody's different. We have to figure out what works best and then get a handful of those to utilize for different reasons when you're going through different things. But I think a quick start is really like a gratitude journal.
Yeah, we do. We try to do it every day, but it depends on the day. But we try to do high-low high with our 5-year-old. So Molly, you know, high-low high might not always be. It could be just something as simple. She's like, we went outside for recess, and then the low is like, we didn't go outside for recess. So you know, it's sometimes interesting, but like we have her give like a high point of her day, a low point of her day, and then another high point. And we try to take the low point, like, you know, how can we make that not be a low point again? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I said the high points are like, we had lunch, like, mm-hmm. Okay, like you're going to have lunch every day in kindergarten. Like, that's not really a high point. That just is a point. But we try to do that with her and make her at least think about like what, you know, what went on that day. And I know like when we first started it, she was probably like 3 or 4. And that was interesting because like, it was hard for her to even like process that stuff. Yeah. But I think that's hard for just anyone. Cause like, you know, to actively think about a high and low point of the day, you're like you don't really want to go into that. Like who wants to think about the low stuff? But like, if you can think about it and maybe get it out there, then you can move on. Mm-hmm. Like you said, like even like with the, like, how do you feel before the workout? That's another thing I added, so that'll be out there soon too. Is there's a pre-workout thing that says like, how did you eat? How did you sleep? How did you drink?
Yes.
How stressed are you? How do you feel? Because like, and it gives like a little score. Then the score says like, go work out because you're fine and you should go work out. Or it says, go see Ryan because maybe you're a little too beat up or stressed or whatever it is, and we need to adjust your workout a little bit. Or it says, go the fuck home because you're so sore and stressed and you didn't sleep and like you need a rest day, not a day in the gym. Mm-hmm. So those are a couple of things that I like, because like, you know, it makes me feel good that you're saying these things, because like I've been trying to think of like just getting people in the mindset for certain things, because people, like you said, react so differently. Like for me, I know like for deadlift, like I really need to take my time and get myself in the right mindset and slow down, where for squat, I'm like way more aggressive. And I kind of want people to start thinking about how they are for the lifts or for the workout, and actually focus on that a little bit more than just going through the motions. So like if you need to step up to the bar and take a deep breath and mentally walk yourself through the lift before you do it, do that. Don't just skip that. Like actually do it. Treat it the way you want it to, like on a meet day, so that you're getting in that same pattern and you're doing the good things that you need to do to be better at it instead of just going through the motions.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what you're having your daughter do. The fact that you have her end on the high, I think is really important, because even if you're journaling just the junk in your head, I think it's always good to tack on something positive at the end, no matter what. But actually, I do want to point out that even if she just finds lunch to be the high, that's okay, because
It's fine.
What I encourage people to do is, it's those day-to-day things that we just like do and don't think about that we lose sight of, and they're important to give yourself credit for. So like eating that meal, I made my bed, even though these may seem like just part of the normal day-to-day routine, it's important to give ourselves credit for that stuff, because it's just as easy to not do any of it. And so if your high of the day is that you really enjoyed your lunch, or you finally had time for lunch because normally work is way too busy, then write it down, because it counts.
Yeah,
and it could be that, somebody that gets to the gym and then you may send them home because their checklist was shot to shit. But the fact that they went there and they were having a shit day and they still got there and they were willing to do it, but then they went home, that still counts. They showed up.
Right. No, and I think that like showing up is probably 90% of this. Like, like if you don't show up, you're not getting anything done. So just show up, and even if you're just going through the motions, that's better than doing nothing.
I made a note here, something, all or something versus all or nothing, right? And so something is always better than nothing. And even if you show up and you do 20 minutes and you're like, you know what, that's all I got in me today, that's okay.
Yeah,
it's
still better than sitting at home and just skipping it. So no, I agree with that. And we're not mad at our daughter for that. We just think it's funny when she's like, I had lunch. And we're like, no shit, you had lunch. Like, you're in kindergarten, you have lunch every day. And she's like, yeah, but I had lunch. We're like, all right. And then the low was like, I spilled my milk though at lunch. And then the lunch was like, but I got something else. And they're like, all right, whatever. Like, what about the fact that you saw us? And she's like, no, don't care. So,
but that does tie into your sort of philosophy in competition, in the sense that at the end of the day, unless you're fighting for position, right? Or even then, like if you always want to try to end on a lift that you've made, just specifically because of that buck situation. But if you would rather have an athlete hit a lift that they know they have than try to send it and go for a lift they know they don't have. At least at the end of that competition, they know they've hit all their numbers and they either PR'd or did something, accomplished something, rather than ending the whole meet in a missed lift, big, oh crap, I should have done something else.
Yeah, that's, a made lift with less weight is still better than a missed lift. Like the missed lift, like I said, like Bucks just remember that lift, where if he made that lift the next meet he probably would have lifted 25 pounds more. But it's just, even if maybe it's not the biggest goal that you wanted, but it's still a positive. It's ending on that positive. Like for anyone that's missed that third deadlift in a meet, that last lift, you go up for your last lift, you're all pumped and you miss. You think about that forever. And it's weird because like as a pitcher, like I had to have a short memory. Like if I threw a pitch and you hit a home run, I have to forget that immediately because I have to throw another pitch in 15 seconds. Yeah. Where in powerlifting, you've got 6 months before you get to go again. So you get to think about it and stew on it. But yeah, like I said, I had to forget about it because the next guy's coming up. And if I stew about it, I'm going to give up another home run because I'm going to do something stupid. So that was like, I was trying to think of like, if you had just any just tangible things that like, for people that can, like in the gratitude journal, like, on like a meet day. So meet day is probably, it's super stressful. like I said, we plan 3 to 6 months for this one day for everything to go right. And sometimes it does. And sometimes it goes horribly wrong. And the problem is, like, sometimes when it goes horribly wrong, it's just because of something stupid. Or like a weird situation where, like, I was talking to Kate about this the other day. 4 or 5 years ago at Nationals, Kate got really sick at Nationals and actually ended up having a great meet like 3 days later. Like it was weird. Like, that shouldn't have happened, but it did. But then on the opposite end, like, Megan had not a great meet, and then a week later, like, came to the gym. She goes, I feel good, and like beat all of the goal numbers we had for the meet. And I was like, okay, well, that 6 months of planning, I was off by 6 days. So I screwed the whole thing up by 6 days. And, like, you know, and she didn't mind. She was able to kind of go through it and it was fine. But, you know, I think, and we talked to Stephanie about this, and Steph a couple weeks ago, like, on the podcast, about different mindset stuff. Like, how can you go in, you know, like on meet day, and how can you mentally prepare yourself? Because, like, we've done everything physically for months on end to get ready, and then meet day happens, and how, and like you said, I know it's going to be different for every person, but, like, what are some things that they can do that can help them kind of be in the moment and focus on the good stuff and hopefully perform as well as they should be?
Well, I think, you know, I'm not going to go into detail about this, but I know you guys remember from the last presentation I did, a lot of it is challenging the thought patterns, which I use cognitive behavioral therapy to do that with, you know, which is a longer conversation. But I think one thing, I forget his name, Buck, what'd you say his name is?
Bucks.
So in terms of that, you know, that example you're talking about, that ties back to the identity, and just that one lift, allowing one lift to define all of your progress and who you are, is very derailing for someone's progress, right? And they'll usually, like you said, carry that into the next meet, which can be just a hindrance on the progress in general. So working on, you know, helping people retrain the brain so they don't allow that one lift or one incident to define who they are and how they will approach the next competition is where the work is. But, you know, general things that you hear all the time, like visualizing how you want it to go, what it looks like, all that stuff you hear about, is always very helpful. But again, it comes back to that positive self-talk, knowing, you know, trusting their training, right? You know, that self-talk that, okay, I've done everything that Ryan's given me. I've stayed on track with my nutrition. I've worked with the dietitian, whoever it may be. Those reminders to themselves, and maybe they write that down, that they've been following the program and they've done the best that they can, and all they can do in the meet, in the competition, is the best that they can. But focusing on the positive language and the positive technique and strategy, rather than these are the things I have to avoid so I don't fuck up and miss the lift, which is where we get stuck. Because it's really easy. You already know what you don't want to do, but again, it's that reframe. And so I think working on the reframe all the time is important leading up to the competition. So that way it becomes more natural for them to begin thinking about focusing on the things they're supposed to be doing, that they've been working their butts off. So they go into that with a more positive headspace. But also everybody needs their own little, like, routine, I think, that they have to figure out. Most people, you know, whether it's listening to a certain playlist or what have you, or eating a specific, you know, us athletes are all superstitious, right? So we've got our routines and our strategy, we know it works. And so having a solid plan for that day, but also I think what's really important is having a plan after. And I know there's usually a rest period after a competition, but, you know, aside from just knowing we're taking a break from the training, it may be helpful to have a post-competition plan for everyone, whether they figure that out on their own or you guys do it together, in terms of mental health, and processing. You know, you build up to a competition and then it's over, and either you did well or you didn't. Either way, there's a loss after that, right? You hear that a lot, whether you win the championship game, or people after their wedding, they have this build up to their wedding and then it's over. And there's sadness. It's a grieving process that comes with that. And so, you know, we don't necessarily identify it that way with athletes. It's like people get angry or, you know, whatever, and they don't actually have the insight or ability or the awareness that there's some grieving that goes along with that. And so how can we process that and work through it effectively to get back on track? But give yourself that space, give yourself that time to say, oh man, all right, I worked all the way up to that competition. It's over now. Now what do I do? And so if they have that post plan, it can be helpful. So they even know that no matter what, they're going to be fine.
I mean, Said, unless you got more, I think that's good for today, because I'm thinking like I've got stuff to go do now for post meet stuff.
All right.
And like normally I don't think about that stuff like during a podcast, but now I'm like, oh, I can do a couple things and see if I can make stuff better for the next time.
And obviously, I'm always available. But before we conclude, since Syed started with a quote, can I also share one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know, I think one thing I think can be helpful is just when we want people to acknowledge that maybe they could have more assistance. Because I know Ryan sometimes will be like, you know, these people are amazing lifters, but they're in their heads and I don't know what to do. And how do we say this gently? And I recently reposted this quote that I think is just helpful in general. And it says, when I say, have you considered seeing a therapist? I'm not saying you're so messed up, only a professional can help you. What I'm saying is, have you considered that you're worthy of an unbiased, safe, and productive opportunity to process your experiences? And it's just a reframe about seeking help. You're at the gym to be trained by a professional. You can get yourself trained mentally elsewhere by a different type of professional, and that's okay.
Awesome. I love that. Where can people find you, either on social media, professionally, if they wanted to reach out to you, set up a meeting, can they go?
So on Instagram, you can find me at Stability Counseling. Facebook also. My email is Kacy, Kacy, at stabilitycounseling.com. Phone number 203-213-7125. And my website is stabilitycounseling.com. It's all linked up together.
So much stuff.
And we'll have it in the description of the YouTube video. So.
Awesome.